You've said that a hike in April is an option if the inflation outlook sours. Are we there yet?
Well, I think it is a very opaque situation. I think, I believe from today, from this standpoint, I would say there's not enough clarity what will happen in April, but I still keep the position that we should have all the optionalities that are necessary to tackle the situation, and we will take into account the data we will have in April, and then we will see.
And I understand things fluctuate, on an hourly basis, but what do you need to happen to support a rate hike in April?
Well, what I see is that this question around the Strait of Hormuz is a very essential one. This is the Achilles heel of the world economy, so this has to be resolved. And I believe this is ongoing, this uncertainty, and this will trigger also uncertainty regarding oil prices. Everything what is going around in the world is dependent on that question. This is a bottleneck, and so I believe 2 weeks can bring a lot of new information, and we will take that into account.
Good information as well, because to be clear, I'm not a military strategist, but at the moment it's very difficult to see a way forward in the immediate term.
Well, I'm not a military expert on that, but what I see is a lot of fog around this question. So, as I alluded to, is changing on a daily basis. So, it's all about geoeconomics and geopolitics, and from a monetary policy point of view, it's definitely not a very comfortable situation. I think it developed a little bit better over the course of the last week, but it's still a very delicate situation. And as I said, a lot of uncertainties around this question.
President, a lot of households, right, especially in Europe, will have the memory of 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Is that what's lifting also inflation expectations, maybe higher than warranted?
I can't exclude this. I think you're perfectly right that households learned from the crisis in 2022. So we have to see how they might react, how their reaction function is. This is one of the things we have to look at. Momentarily, I would say on a medium term, inflation seems to be well anchored, but this can change. So it's really too early to say that we are again on a safe ground. It's a very shaky situation.
What did central banks learn from 2022? There's a lot of criticism that you were a little bit late to the game. Does that mean it gets readjusted in 26?
Well, I would say the situation in 2022 was a different one. We came out of the pandemic. Now when this war started in the Middle East, we were pretty much on our target, so the situation was completely different. 2022, inflation was already high, so it is not the same situation, but we learned something from 2022. We will look at it and we will assess the situation again when we are coming together in Europe, deciding about the future rate path. But there is no pre-commitment where we are going. I think we should have our flexibility here, what we do, and this gives us some, room to maneuver.
Yeah, and again, because the situation is so fluid, there are a number of scenarios, but does the baseline that the ECB has already warrant hikes?
Well, I think the baseline scenario was based on data of mid of March, so now we are here 4 or 5 weeks later. So I would say we are somewhere in between our baseline scenario and our adverse scenario. Now we have to find out where it's going. It's going back to the baseline scenario. I'm a very happy person, but as I said, we should keep our flexibility. I think this is the strength of good central banking, that we should take into account all the necessary information and then draw the right conclusions.
But Governor, if it doesn't go back to baseline next 3 weeks, is that what warrants a hike? I'm trying to understand, again, it's a timeline, right? So you're trying to hit a moving target.
I will not exclude one or the other thing. I think this is something, it is too early to say where we are going, and as I said, I need more information about this, keeping optionalities. I have to repeat myself here, and then we will see.
Yeah, I'm trying to push, and you're sticking to your guns. I like that. This is the game. Look, your 2025 strategy review also says that under certain circumstances, preemptive action to avert de-anchoring may be necessary. Were you thinking about a scenario like this?
Well, I think up till now, I do not see any de-anchoring of inflation expectations. So this is good news, but this could change. Maybe it's too early to come to the conclusion that everything is all right. So I guess we need some time. And coming back to my point, as long as the situation in the Middle East around the Strait of Hormuz is not resolved, if there's not a stable, let me say, situation about this bottleneck that is so important for the world economy, the danger is rising that we will see again an inflation push, uncertainty might go up even further, and this might trigger then a process that could really become very tricky and I guess also dangerous.
Governor, I haven't asked, I mean, we talked about hikes, but I haven't asked you about how you would calibrate it. I mean, could you see 2 hikes to 2.5%, sending a message of we mean business, but actually not too much? Well, like baby hikes.
You will not get from me any let me say, indication. I see what markets are, what is the market expectation. Yeah. Well, as always, I think the market will see how we react in the Governing Council in Europe, and I have to take this very decent approach.
I understand, which is why I love interviewing so much. But you know, would you say that equity markets are off, but actually option markets for hikes are in a better place? Because again, we're not sure what the market is looking at.
I appreciate the optimism of the equity markets. I think it is helpful to a certain extent that there's not more, let me say, turbulence we see from equity markets or stock markets. But again, we should be very vigilant, very cautious, take all necessary information and look what will happen over the course of the upcoming next 2 weeks. And I hope really that we will find a solution how to stabilize the situation in the Middle East.
If you see inflation, and what's your pain threshold for looking at inflation go above target? If it's a bit short-lived, like inflation at 3%, 4%, does that, like what, you know, what's the trigger or red alert sign?
It looks like, at least for the moment, as I said, we cannot say, well, this is transitory or that will stay for a longer period. I will not tackle one number or give you one number that would make
give me two.
that or maybe two that would make me nervous. So it is not a very comfortable situation, but at the end, I believe we will deliver on our mandate. This is price stability, and we will do everything what is necessary to keep the interest rates where they are or change. We will decide on that in 2 weeks.